no one really talks about what happens next. And as far as support, that disappears. So that's where the Brain Healing Collective comes in. And again, I really wanted to help with the sense of loneliness in community, or lack thereof, and as far as like a direction and a path forward.
Welcome back to Brain, sponsored by Toro and Tides. You're tuning into our awareness series where I bring on leading voices who are advancing recovery, expanding understanding, and improving life for the brain injury community. Today, we're joined by Kerri Potthoff, a speech therapist and founder of the Brain Healing Collective. Her work focuses on what happens after people transition out of the hospital and rehab care when they're back at home and figuring out what life looks like next. This is the part of the recovery that doesn't get talked about enough. When the appointments stop, when the structure disappears and the support isn't as clear. Kerri is building something different, creating space for connection, accountability, and continued growth beyond traditional care. Now, in this conversation, we dive into her work, her perspective, and how support can evolve beyond traditional care. Kerri, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much, Evan. I'm so happy to be here and share a little bit more about the Brain Healing Collective and specifically the Reconnect program and
Yeah,
how it can support the community.
you are killing it. Now, we had a pre-call, so I know a little bit about your story and all the amazing things you're doing. But for our audience, give us a brief background of who you are and how you kind of found yourself in this space.
Absolutely. So, my name's Kerri. I am a speech language pathologist and certified brain injury specialist. So, I've been in the neuro space for almost 8 years now, post grad school, and have been working as a speech therapist specifically in the inpatient rehab program, first in Iowa and then now at Craig Hospital in Denver. And I've always been passionate about brain injury. I knew from day one of my neuro class, like, this is what I want to do, and these are my people and who I want to work with. So yeah, and then from being an inpatient rehab specialist, I created something totally different to help support life after brain injury. So I'm excited to talk about that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, inpatient rehab, you're in the trenches with
Mhm.
these brain injury survivors. And then what's often overlooked is after they're out of inpatient, they're kind of thrown into the wild. And this is where your creation evolved, correct?
Exactly. Yes. So over the years, I kept in touch with a few patients or family members who reached out months, even years post once they were home. And what really came up a lot was the isolation feeling and like the what next question. And I think, an inpatient, even outpatient, you have your team, you have your bubble, you have so much support. And then at some point you're discharged and no one really talks about what happens next. And as far as support, that disappears. So that's where the Brain Healing Collective comes in. And again, I really wanted to help with the sense of loneliness in community, or lack thereof, and as far as like a direction and a path forward. Because some folks may not be working, you may not be driving. Identity, that seems lost at this time in the recovery. So it's a space to help support during that phase in recovery.
You described if you had a resume for me after I was discharged from rehab, you just put everything on my resume. I mean, that isolation, that lack of direction, and really ultimate confusion, where it's I had that structure. I was
Yeah.
at an inpatient facility, and then when I was transferred out, I did do outpatient, but it wasn't as structured. It wasn't 5 days a week. It was three, then it went down to one. And then afterwards, everybody just washed their hands of me. There was no more checking in. Yeah, I had my friends in rehab, but that was on and off too. So that isolation has been one of the most challenging things in this recovery. What prompted you? I mean, did you have firsthand experiences where you had these former clients saying, please, like, I just need help, or what did that look like? Because this takes a lot of initiative to jump into this. I mean, you already have this secure background, this medical career. You don't need to be doing this, but you are.
hmm You know, I kind of created it just from hearing what I was hearing from all these previous patients. So they would ask for like a direction, or I would try to look for resources for them, like point them in the right direction of like, hey, have you looked into this or this? And there's just nothing that really exists. And that's why I created this online program so I can reach people all over. It could be US, it could be Canada, it could be Puerto Rico. So I wanted to make sure I could reach people all over and it's easily accessible. We're flexible at times. I think, a huge part of this and what I was hearing is there's not a ton of emotional support and there's not a ton of cognitive support. And those are two areas that I specialize in. So I really felt like I had the tools and I was like looking to do something more creative to support life after discharge. So that's how I really kind of crafted this. And I think a lot of times, people focus on the physical deficits, maybe
Hmm.
walking or balance. Those are very tangible, right? And then when we talk about your executive functioning or we talk about like your emotional regulation after a brain injury, those are things that you may not recognize until you're at home and living your life. They're a little more abstract. So those are, I always say this while people are inpatient, that's really the long goal. That's the long road is the cognition and the emotional piece of it.
I love that because I have struggled and still do struggle with both facets. And it's
Mhm.
something, I mean, it's not like an art project where you put the final piece of paint on and it's done. I feel like this is going to be continuous care for me throughout the rest of my life, just
Yeah,
with the ebbs and flows of it. And what you're offering for these former patients or these people that have just come across the name of the company is incredibly beneficial. Let's talk about the resources that are offered and how it's an 8-week program, correct?
right. Yes.
So what do they
So
see during these 8 weeks?
yeah, during the 8 weeks. So it's 8 weeks all online. And our three pillars are really mindfulness, identity, and connection. So really, it's a more holistic approach, which is something I enjoy because it's less clinical and more human. So what's included in that 8 weeks is you get one-to-one sessions with me online on our Fridays, I would say 60 minutes online. And we really focus on the executive functioning, your memory, a lot of goal setting, goal tracking, accountability with those sessions. And then on Mondays, we have our group sessions. And with the program, everyone has their own workbook, which kind of has our curriculum. So everyone is following along in this workbook. We have a cohort of four right now. I would say like 2 to 4, but typically four people in the group just to keep it intimate. So during those Monday group sessions, we have a topic. We're working through our workbook. And that's led by me. So those are the two that are led by me. Now, the other two are not with me. One is a peer mentor, and that's led by Kristen Bowman, who is a traumatic brain injury survivor. And she just meets with folks or I would say in groups of two weekly. But it's very casual, just kind of come as you are, really no topic unless it's needed. So that is just kind of takes it where you want. It's all brain injury survivors. Again, I am not in those sessions because I was really passionate about, just connecting with brain injury survivors. And then the last one is a emotional support group led by Andrew Davey, and he similarly also had suffered an AVM and now is leading our support group. Went back to be a counselor and now is leading our support group on Sundays. So again, that's led by him, a brain injury survivor with lived experience. So yeah, between like across the week, it's about 4 hours online for those 8 weeks. And folks, they have the workbook. We communicate via Slack throughout the week with announcements, reminders, a lot of resources. Like we have a resource library. And then a huge part of it, which I'm very passionate about, is just not discharging at the end of this or not just getting dropped off from support. So we have our monthly alumni meetups as well, because over the course of 8 weeks, you get very close to your people and people who actually get it and you can relate to. So I wanted to continue that care. And so every month we meet as a group online with our alumni group, which is really fun. And just for everyone to catch up and, connect again is really meaningful.
So much that I want to unpack with all this
Yes.
wonderful information you just threw at us. You have a full roster of who you're working with. I mean, you have your medical background, and then you have these two survivors that offer this intimate care. I mean, I know it's just four per session, usually 2 to 4 people per session for the 8 weeks, but you're giving them access to lived experience, which is extremely rare to find when you're going through rehab. Because for me, I mean, I've been to 19 different facilities, and I've said, I'm sure my listeners are like, shut up, dude, we've heard that so many times, but it does relate to this conversation because it's usually just one-on-one, me with the
Hmm.
speech therapist. And yeah, they see a lot of brain injury survivors, but they're not a brain injury survivor. And there's a big
Right.
difference because y'all are trained through a textbook, which is amazing. I mean, you get the
Right.
medical side of it, but
Hmm.
survivors, we live and breathe it every single day. And you've brought two people onto your team that are doing an emotional support group and a peer mentor group.
Hmm.
Why did you decide to add these two things into the curriculum?
Well, like I said, cognition is my world, but as far as the emotional support, a counselor was needed, and it's just amazing. Like it's really was meant to be that Andrew found me when he did, and he was really interested in what I was doing, and so we connected, and it just really aligned with my vision. So I wanted a lot. I wanted at least half of it to be led by a brain injury survivor, because who am I to say how this feels or how we should respond? Because I haven't suffered a traumatic brain injury. I haven't had a stroke. So I think having lived experience is crucial. And I think a lot of times on like within support groups, maybe they're online, maybe they're in person, it could be a massive group, maybe inconsistent, like week to week, who's going to show up. I don't really feel comfortable, not very intimate. So I wanted, it to be an intimate space, and I wanted it to be consistent where who's going to show up week to week, because we have 2 to 4 people, and you kind of know that going into it. So again, I think the emotional piece is something I wanted more support with when launching this program, and thank God for Andrew and Kristen, because they're so good at what they do and they have the lived experience to really relate to these folks. A lot of times I just hear like people coming or leaving the session and saying, I finally feel like I've been heard,
Mm.
or they just get it. And it's wild because you're like, you're months, you're maybe years post, and you're just now having that feeling of, oh, I'm not alone in this. So it's really been impactful to have Kristen and Andrew on board.
Yeah, it's so sad to hear that from
Hmm.
other survivors, but it's so also
Right.
comforting and warming to hear that because now they finally get that connection. But to echo with what you said, I've had other guests on this show where it has been years where
Hmm.
they haven't been heard. And it's just, that's devastating. So, from the work
Right.
you're doing, I mean, it goes beyond that cognitive care, like you mentioned, which is, it's so cool, or that cognition, right? The
Right.
executive function. You are creating this space for connection, which is one of the three pillars.
Right.
I do want to dive into another one, the mindfulness. How do you
Absolutely.
approach this through those sessions?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research backed by mindfulness as far as meditation, breath work, even simple movement. I have a yoga certification through Love Your Brain where we can do simple
Mm,
movement with folks. So, with knowing how helpful it can be, I always offer it, and most people are open-minded in the program and are willing to try it. So, a lot of sessions, we may start with 5 minutes of guided meditation, we may start with guided breathing. So I think just coming to a place where your nervous system is grounded, your cognition is going to be a much more successful, a lot more efficient. And as far as your emotional state, how is it not supporting that? So as far as, one of my pillars, I include that in every session. I include that on our Monday night group sessions. It really is a massive focus of every time I'm meeting with folks, and it gives them tools for moving forward outside of the program.
yeah, that you remind me so much of these two other speech therapists that I've had along this journey. And those two, just so you know, are on my Mount Rushmore of therapists over these last 6 years.
Thank you
Because
for
it
saying that.
it makes a huge difference, that mindfulness approach where yoga and being in tune with your body is so important when you're really walking through this space because you need that grounding. You need, something to hold on to. And I think that's often overlooked because it's more like, man, pounding your head against a wall where it's like, well, why am I not understanding this? Why am I not getting these answers right? When you really kind of take a step back and get in tune with your body. It does
Uh-huh.
wonders. It did for me. It
Right.
still does because it's just that gentle approach, which is
Mhm.
obviously proven to be successful with what your participants are saying.
Right,
I
right.
am curious about your curriculum, your
Mm,
workbook.
mm.
How does this differ from what they would typically see at a rehab facility, or is it similar?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very different. Again, like kind of pulling from the holistic approach. So, what we talk about in our workbook, a lot of it is the difference between resilience and recovery, a lot of goal setting. So, it's very personalized to them and it's driven by them. So, there's space to write, there's space to edit. We have a daily checklist that we work through. I think that is massive as far as habits and kind of goal setting. So they're checking in with that daily. At about week 4, week 3, we introduce that. So we have our weekly planner, we have our weekly tracker. A lot of that, they're kind of coming to me on Fridays and we're problem solving through on one-on-one. So it's like I said, very individualized. It's not necessarily, I would say, worksheets and such that there's just no research behind it. So this is again driven by the patient. We have to make it salient, we have to make it meaningful. So a lot of it's education, and then a lot of it's more like them filling out their goals, tracking their goals, and planning out their weeks.
Man, all right, I got a tough question for you, and
Okay.
I do not want to give away, the answers to your curriculum because it's important. I want people to sign up for this. But
Right.
I love this resiliency or resilience versus recovery.
Mhm.
Two
Right.
very different things.
100%.
Let's unpack that. Can we unpack this? I want to hear
Yeah,
your perspective
let's do it.
on the difference between these two.
Right. We have a couple pages on this in the workbook itself, but a lot of times after injury, folks will hear the word recovery and like, what does that mean after a severe injury? You know, 100% of who I was pre-injury or 90%, what does recovery mean? So that word in itself, I think you have to have a clear understanding when people are throwing that word around in inpatient or, outpatient. But the word resilience, I think of maybe like a twig. It bends but never snaps. If you let go of a twig, it like will snap back into place, but it will never break. So after an injury, thinking more of how we respond to adversity, how can I control my mindset? What are my thoughts going through my brain while I'm recovering in this era, like very tough era? So thinking and kind of remapping that thought of more resilience-based mindset of I'm going to handle all things that come my way, and I know I'm resilient. I know I'll bounce back. Versus I need to become the pre-injury version of myself. So being able to mold that identity, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I've heard somebody else say that who's also been on this show, and I love it. I think it's so important for our listeners to hear this because you do think recovery, it's like a broken arm, right? Okay, the cast comes off. I completed physical
Mhm.
therapy. I can still use my arm again.
Right.
Recovery is not linear with a brain injury, but resiliency, showing up every day, that takes priority. And it's tough. It's very
Mm.
tough living with a brain injury, having that resiliency. Um, where do you where do you see the most challenge or the pushback with the people that go through your classes? Is there something that's kind of common with everybody? Do they not buy into the mindfulness? Do they struggle with that? Or is it kind of the frustration where it's, well, I'm 5 years in, this is as good as it's going to get? What do you do when you see situations like this, and how do you navigate through that?
I think what's interesting is I'm working with adults with brain injury, so they have all their values, they have their belief system in place, and that is something I'm not going to change, right? So coming back to their values of why is this important to you? I think one of the biggest barriers I run into is like kind of like you mentioned, I'm this way. I've always been this way. It's not going to change. And that is a total different mindset of like, okay, well, how are we thinking this way? So a lot of what we do is come back to their values and we identify those before we make their short-term and long-term goals. And coming back to that is like, how would my best self respond? How would someone with my values respond? And then kind of working from there. I think that's the way we kind of work around that because that's a common theme of like I'm 58. I've had a stroke. I'm 6 years post. Like,
Hmm.
you're not going to change me, you know. Typically in the Reconnect program, people are coming because they are seeking help. They have skin in the game. They're like really wanting to work at this. But yeah, that comes up, of course. I mean, we all, I think, have a belief system that we're like, I'm running into this roadblock. How can I work around it?
Guilty. Me. Yeah, I'm
Right.
there. I'm there. Okay, everybody's there. You said it. You said
Right?
it. You don't have to
Yeah.
have a brain injury to think that way. So a lot of people listening are going to want to know more, more details about this or how to get in contact with you. And I'm sure, with limited slots, that
Right.
is there an enrollment period? Do you do it, by quarters? What does that process look like? How often are you hosting
Right.
these 8-week sessions?
So right now I'm hosting these 8 week sessions 4 times a year. So we're in the middle of our spring session. Our next session is going to start at the beginning of July. So I'm starting enrollment now, kind of like a soft enrollment. I'm accepting anywhere from 2 to 4 at a time. So enrollment is open as of, I think, last week I released the dates. And so I will say earlier you get on the list, it's cheaper and you get the workbook and then you get added resources before the start date. So that's one benefit of getting in the program and confirming that you're in before the summer starts.
Okay, so you did mention it's cheaper when you sign up earlier. Can you give us some insight on what costs would look like if his insurance is collected or if it's private pay?
100%. So because it is a more holistic approach, we don't take insurance. So because I'm tapping on some of the mindfulness, I'm pulling more from some counselors and then my skills, it is private pay. And what it's at right now is 850 for the 8 weeks online. So, in my clinical brain, I think, oh, 4 hours of support a week for 8 weeks, that's a really great deal. But if you sign up ahead of time, it's $250 off. So that cutoff, I will say, is June 1st. So that brings it down to $600 if you sign up before. And then again, you get the added benefits pre-session. So yes, private pay. We have Klarna. We have lots of options. You just give me a down payment to secure that spot, and then we'll work through whether you want to pay it off over the year, over 2 payments, three, whatever works best for you. I think one more thing is I don't want funding to be the reason someone can't participate in the program. So that's something I've been hugely passionate about. I've been reaching out to as many funding options as possible. And then I also have a scholarship fund that's funded by both alumni and then a separate one from the community. And those help with the tuition of some of these memberships. So if that is a barrier, we can definitely talk about scholarship funds and how that could support.
I want to turn this towards you now, Kerri,
Mhm.
because you're doing incredible things for the brain injury community. Again, I just people are going to hear this, and this piques my curiosity too. Where does this love and this compassion and this empathy stem from for the brain injury community? I mean, sure, you fell in love with, studying the brain and the anatomy in in undergrad. Like, but now you're taking it to this whole other level. You could have just stayed in the clinical setting. Now you're bringing it home. You're working extra hours. Why? What makes you wake up every day wanting to benefit the brain injury community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, I come back to adults who lived a full life and then something severe and traumatizing happened to them. And so I think I'm so inspired by the patients and the people that I get to meet that that's what motivates me to continue to want to help and be a part of the community. I think of a previous patient who's actually been through the program and just so full of life, but still needing a direction. And I feel I have the tools to help with that. And I also am a human. We crave connection, and I have a whole bunch of compassion for this population. And so, yeah, I think there's so many things based on my lived experience working with this population that I want to continue to support and help. And I think the biggest thing, you get to see these small steps, you get to see these really big gains, anywhere in between. I love being a witness to that and just being along their side. And that's what inspires me is all the hard work that I get to witness.
And you mentioned hard work. It works on both sides of the table, right? You're working so hard for the brain injury community, and then these people that will be signing up for your classes, they've already bought into it, obviously, because they want to put in that extra work after discharge. So working hard is one of the core principles of living with a brain injury. I mean,
Right.
I applaud you for what you're doing. I applaud every brain injury survivor that's willing to take that next step to work with you,
Right.
to better support that what's next, because it is
Right.
scary. It is uncertain, and success, I think, is an interesting word. How would you define success for yourself and the future of this beautiful thing that you're building?
Yeah. I feel success for the Brain Healing Collective to me is reaching as many people as I can, no matter where they are. So I would love to build this community. I would love to build the alumni space. I would love to hire more and have more support out there so we can reach people in different time zones. That to me would be success. Yes, that is my vision, and I'm really excited about it because I do think there's so much potential and such a need for it that if we can continue to get the word out. It's early days, but I think to me, success is in the community.
Amazing. All right. I always give my guests the last word,
Oh
but
boy.
I'm going to do this in two separate approaches. One, I want you to speak to the brain injury community, our brain injury listeners. And then two, I want you to pitch your collective, why you think it's so beneficial. Right? Can we do that? You want me to prompt you with
Do
two
it.
separate questions? Is it too
Yeah,
much?
yeah, yeah. You'll reel me back in. That'd be helpful.
Okay, cool. So let's start with this. A final push, final pitch for the work that you're doing, why individuals should sign up for this.
I think for individuals that are considering it, if you're looking for a path forward or you're not sure what's next, maybe things feel different at home. I think it's worth a try. It helps provide a sense of guidance, a sense of support, and you have a community you can turn to for the rest of your life. So, as far as the Brain Healing Collective, I think there's so much opportunity for growth, individual growth, and really there's so many goals you have yet to achieve. So, why not start now?
Amazing. Okay, now one more as a trained medical provider and business owner now. Your final words to the brain injury community, whether that's support, encouragement, whatever you think is best for them to hear.
I would say one small step is a step. So each day, thinking of one small step or one brick you can lay down to continue to work towards your future self, the best version of yourself. So even the smallest steps count.
Kerri, wise words. Y'all, again, it is called the Brain Injury Collective. You can find it online on social media as well. I'll be sure to include all those links so you can reach out. But like Kerri said, if you're having a tough day, just focus on laying down one brick. Every day you got an opportunity to do that. So continue to work hard and reach out to Kerri because she could change your life. All right, Kerri, thank you so much for jumping on the show with me. I really appreciate it. Ladies
Thank
and
you, Evan.
gentlemen, we will see you on the next podcast.